Hello everyone and welcome to this episode of Unearthed Horticulture. Today the topic is repotting your houseplants, and I'm going to give you some pro tips on how to do it and different methods for making sure you have lush and beautiful plants this summer. But first off, to start with, why do we repot our houseplants this time of year? I mean, houseplants, they're in our house and we have ambient temperatures year round. Why can't we just pot them up any time of year? Well, first of all, you can repot your plants any time of year. It's just not ideal. The reason is that as we ease into summer, our day lengths are becoming longer and our days are actually much brighter. We don't have as many overcast days. So all of that light is coming into our homes and actually has a huge impact on your plant's health and growth. So repotting this time of year is very valuable for your plant because now it's going to have all of that light energy to help push and promote growth, to fill out its new container that you've just repotted into. So I hope that makes sense. But let's just go ahead and dive in. And I have a couple plants here that have needed repotting actually for the last month or so. And I'm going to show you my process for repotting. So the first plant we're going to take a look at repotting is this tornado snake plant. This is actually my mom's plant. I gave it to her for Christmas. And we've been struggling with keeping it watered because it's in soil that's been so old and has dried out so many times that it's just not taking moisture back in. So this is reason number one to repot your plants. If the soil is old or if it's broken down and there's not very much left in the pot, there's not as much airspace in the soil mix, that's a really great reason to repot. You don't always want to size up containers when you change out your soil, especially with this guy. You can see it barely has any roots. It's barely rooted. So I don't want to go up in size from what it was currently in. So I'm going to leave it in this pot and I'm just going to change out the soil. Our potting mixes are made from soilless substrates. So most of ours that are accessible to you at garden centers are peat-based, peat moss. And peat moss is not soil, it's an organic substance. But peat moss tends to develop this hydrophobia as it gets dried out and ages, which makes it really difficult for it to take in water after it dries out completely. All right, so I'm just gonna pop this guy into this pot, gonna refresh that soil. It's important, especially with snake plants, that you don't bury the crown of the plant, and the crown is just the point where the leaves start to shoot out. Burying the crown can lead to root decay because you're holding moisture up high on the plant, and it gets what's called wet feet, and they don't like that. You don't want to really compact the soil by pressing it in too much, so it will be a little wobbly to start with, but after you water it in, it'll be much more firm, and especially as it begins to root and fill out that soil. This guy's a little bit different than maybe some of the plants you're going to repot because it barely had any roots. All right, but we're going to change that. So just to review, the main point of repotting this plant was to refresh the soil. Refreshing the soil is really important with your houseplants for several reasons. First of all, it can help prevent mold or algae issues in the soil, and in turn, also fungus gnats, those pesky little critters. But also it allows you to check the root health of the plant. Like for instance, I didn't know this plant only had like 2 main roots. So that's good to know in future when I'm watering it. It's not going to use water very fast at all because it doesn't have roots to take up that water. All right. So what's left to do with that guy is to fertigate or fertilize and water him in to make him nice and happy. All right. This next big guy here, well, big lady, I should say. I need to like put this over here so you can see the full glory here. This is my painted lady, Philodendron, and she's about a year old. Has a lot of lower, well, these are technically yellowing leaves, but they look very orange. Kind of cool how the older leaves die. But it needs repotting. These lower leaves, yellowing like this or changing colors, are the sign of philodendrons, monsteras, and plants in the Araceae family. It is the sign that they likely need repotting, especially if they're this big in a pot this size. So we're gonna pop it out of here and take a look. And then I'm gonna show you a trick on how to make these vining fills much more full. I'm gonna leave the trellis attached to the plant for the starters here, and I might rearrange it as I go. What's not cool about this pot is that it's tapered up to the mouth, which is gonna make it harder to get the root ball out of the pot. But I've gotta rework the roots anyways for repotting, so it's a-okay. I have my new pot right here. It's just slightly bigger, but I'm kind of sparse with my pots right now, so I'm gonna work on that. All right, watch me struggle now. All right, so this sucker was hard to get out of that pot. And I might have a few casualty leaves, but these lower leaves are gonna be popped off of here anyway, so no harm, no foul. Philodendrons are seriously low-key plants, so don't worry about breaking a few roots here and there. They are fast growers. All right. You can see though, this root ball was pretty tight in there, made it difficult to get out. Honestly, I think I'm gonna go ahead and take this trellis off of here because that made it a little bit more difficult as well. And clearly I'm gonna have to rework this situation. Now we can kind of assess the situation. I've got two really long vines here and they look really cool on a pole, but I'm gonna tell you what else I'm gonna do that's a little bit different. So first off, you've noticed I've been popping off lower leaves that are yellowing. And the reason I'm taking them off is because clearly it's got plenty of other leaves, but also there are already aerial roots coming off the stem at the bottom here. So I'm gonna actually plant this a little bit deeper and allow those to fully form. And so I don't need lower leaves there to bury it with those roots. So we're gonna just kind of clean these stems up here. My arm's gonna get tired doing this. I'm repotting this into a pot that's about 2 to 3 inches larger in size. Honestly, I could probably go up a little bit more for a philodendron, but I am always a big fan of sizing up incrementally. It's a lot healthier for the roots of the plant. So I've got that in there. Now I just gotta fill in around the plant. Okay, so here I have filled in the soil. I've not compacted it. You know, you want to make sure you've got that airspace for the roots. Also, leaving a lip in the pot for water is really helpful. Now, since my arm is getting super tired, it's time to put this trellis back in here and get the plant situated again. All right. And you'll notice that my vines are much longer than my trellis. So there's an easy way to fix that. We're gonna just give this plant a haircut. But first, I wanna kind of see how I can train it up in the first place. Whenever I'm working with vining plants, I feel that I need like 4 or 5 hands. All right. So now I'm seeing where I'm at. And I'm gonna give it a snip right there. Boom. So I just took off here the top part of this vine and we're gonna lay that there for right now. But that's gonna make this a lot easier for me to train without breaking my arms. One really cool thing about Painted Lady is that their veins are pink, and I'll show you an up close of the snip I just made. It is so cool. All right, other side. Okay, if I can see where to make my snip. Boom. Set that guy aside. I'll have to zoom out so you can see the full height of this planting situation because it's a very tall plant. Oftentimes, I mean, the bigger the plant, obviously, the more awkward it's going to be to work with, but also the more magnificent the plant. So you just really got to dive in with these fellers. All right, I zoomed it out a little bit so that you can see where the top of the trellis is. And I literally just snipped off with my sterile snips here, the top of the vine that was getting really top heavy. And now what there is to do is take the tops that I cut off, and since they've got aerial roots, they're root initials. I'll give you an up close here. You can see those stubs coming out at each leaf node here. Those are what we call root initials, and they're going to tap the soil as soon as they've got moisture or humidity or sense any kind of thing like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this bottom leaf off, and there you can see that this plant is so unwieldy. You can see that pink where I snapped it off, which is really cool. And I'm going to stick this directly into the pot. And remember, this soil is going to be moist when I've watered it in. So these roots are going to be triggered to kick into gear. Let's see, I want it to look really nice though. Got to think about how it's going to train on the trellis. All right, this is a great way on no matter what plant. If you propagate back into the container of the mother plant, it helps make it thick and luscious and beautiful and awesome. Let's see here. And I'm using Velcro strips to train the plant with. They're really nice because you can reuse them. And like I just did with repotting this, they're easy to take off and put back on. I know, and this is the kind of plant you could put on a pole, but I really like this honeycomb trellis. So, all right, next one. And I could take this and cut it into multiple cuttings. I'm considering doing that, but also I'm not sure I want to. I'm thinking I'm putting it on the back here, the back side of this trellis, so that I have a more well-rounded plant situation. I think I'm just gonna leave it as one. All right, cool. So right now it looks a little crazy, but it's gonna really fill out and look awesome, especially as the leaves reorient themselves to the sunlight. But you know, with a lot of these fill hybrids, you've just gotta embrace the craziness of them. So when you're repotting, don't be afraid to give it a little pruning, a little snip, like I did with this guy, and use those cuttings. Either put them back into the pot of the mother plant or root them in another pot and give them to friends. I love horticulture because it's the hobby that just keeps on giving. But I'm gonna go ahead and fertigate this guy in, fertilize, water, and also this little snake plant, and put them back on their shelves. But those are my repotting tips. I thought I'd just walk you through a couple of examples of repotting, and maybe you get inspired and have some ideas for repotting your own plants. You get encouraged to tackle some of your awkward plants like this painted lady. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you have any questions, drop them in the comments below. And until next time, you've been watching Unearth Horticulture.